A very hearty good evening, one and all. At the outset, I welcome Chatterjee sir. I'll give brief introduction about Chatterjee sir later on. On behalf of Dhenkanal Science Center, a unit of National Council of Science Museums, Ministry of Culture, Government of India, I welcome you all. Friends, as you all know, today we are celebrating, not only we, all across the globe, this day, 18th May, is being celebrated as International Day of International Museum Day. This day has been celebrated all across the globe since 1977. International Council of Science Museums, IIMC, normally gives a theme on a particular year. So this year's theme is the power of museums. So for that, we have organized a lecture on theme which Chatterjee sir is going to deliver. The theme is the power of museums and how do we harness it. Friends, as you all know, museums have the power to transform the world around us. Museums hold so much information about history, science, and culture. And Chatterjee sir is the right person. Before we start, let me introduce Chatterjee sir. Chatterjee sir is Professor M.Chhaterjee. Is the regional director in Indian Institute of Mass Communication, Dhenkanal. And sir has been working in, is looking after the Eastern India campus of IIMC since 2006. Chatterjee sir is a journalist and media academician. And almost every other day, every week, I see articles related to contemporary issues in almost all the leading newspapers. Sir has published more than 25 books, and everybody, not only in Dhenkanal, Odisha, everywhere is well known. And we are really fortunate enough to have Chatterjee sir with us because he's such a luminary is with us today, and I'm sure his deliberation will enlighten and enrich all of us. This year theme is the power of museums. It is decided by IIMC, International Council of Museums. Friends, for your information, let me tell you, as this event is being celebrated all across the globe, last year around 37,000 museums took part in celebrating International Museum Day. It's streaming. 37,000 museums and from 158 countries took part. And I'm sure this year the number of participating countries and number of museums will enhance. And the Dhenkanal Science Center, almost all science centers under NCSM, National Council of Science Museums, Ministry of Culture, Government of India, is we are not charging any entry fee to the center. And since the last 2 days, our visitor figure has been almost increased 5-fold. We are getting a very good response. Various educational activities we have organized during this period. And this year, IIMC aims to look at museums through 3 lenses that would talk about potential museums, hold to bring about the positive changes in the communities. These 3 lenses I'll brief so that Chatterjee sir will definitely cover those areas. The first one is the power of achieving sustainability. Second, the power of community building through education. The power of innovating on digitalization and accessibility. This year, I come International Council of Museums ends this. So all across globe it is being celebrated and various events, educational extension activities are being organized. So I won't take much time. I don't want to stand between you all and Chatterjee sir. Now may I request Chatterjee sir, please take over and enlighten all of us. Chatterjee sir, the platform is yours now.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rao. And I'm thankful to Dhenkanal Science Center for having organized such an event. And taking a clue from Dhenkanal Science Center, we at IIMC, we also organized students' visit to our small media future. In fact, our students and faculty members conducted students of local schools to our media museum. Now, all of you know that May 18th is celebrated as World Museum Day since 1977. And all of us do know now that the theme of this year's Museum Day is Power of Museums. Before I deliberate on what exactly do we mean by power of museums and how do we harness that power and what next, I mean, we do harness that power and to what end. I mean, all this, before I discuss, let me speak of word or two about the origin and objectives of the museums. This word museum, this has classical origins. In its Greek form, museion, it meant seat of the muses and designated a philosophical institution or, in simple terms, a place of contemplation where people congregate, wise people, knowledgeable people congregate and they contemplate. That is one meaning of the original word in its Greek form. However, by 17th century, museum was being used in Europe to describe collections of curiosities, artifacts, this and that, collections, the repository. So, the origins of the twin concepts, if you can see, one is a place of contemplation and the other concept is a place where artifacts are put together. Exhibits are there for somebody to go and see. So the origins of these twin concepts of preservation and interpretation, this form the basis of the museum. And you'll appreciate that this herein lie in the human inclination to acquire and inquire. These are the two traits of human beings. Acquire, that means you collect artifacts, collectibles, whatever, and then inquire, you contemplate about that. You try to find meaning within that. You try to find connect between artifacts found at one place and the other, whether there are similarities, whether there are dissimilarities. If there are, then why? I mean, all those contemplations, right? Reflections. Now, collections of objects have been found in burials at the early phase of Stone Age, some 2.5 million years ago. Just now I told you this is probably a human trait to collect and keep for posterity. And therefore we find this kind of artifacts some 2.5 million years ago, right? While evidence of inquiry into the environment and communication of the findings could be seen in the cave and mobiliary art of the same period. What is mobiliary art? Some art form which you can carry from one place to the other, right? A development toward the idea of the museum certainly occurred early in the second millennium BC at Larsa. Larsa used to be an important city-state in Mesopotamia, where copies of old inscriptions were made for use in the schools. So the concept of museum as a repository was there from recorded history, second millennium BC. In India also, this concept has been very much there in ancient India. However, in modern times, the first museum in India was built in 1814, 1814, in East India Company time. Founded in 1814 at the cradle of the Asiatic Society of Bengal at the Park Street in Kolkata, this was established. And it was the earliest and the largest multi-purpose museum, not only in Indian subcontinent, but also in the Asia Pacific region of the world. So if you look at terms of historicity, India had its first museum back in 1814, when in the entire Asia Pacific region, there was no modern museum.
Surendra,
If you talk about science museum, the first science museum was again established in Kolkata in 1959, and it was called Birla Science Museum, Birla Science Center, Birla Science Museum, under CSIR. From then till now, I mean, first museum 1814 and now 2022, in all these years in India, we have almost over 1,000 museums under government funding and countless in private ownership, right? We will come back to this concept of private museums in private ownership, or museums funded and run by civil society. That's the new trend internationally. We'll come back to that. And this has a connection with the power that we are talking about, the power of museums. We'll come back to this point later. Now, the museums that I talked about, 1,000 museums under government funding, this could be under the central government, state government, district level museums, museums under universities and institutions, like one we have in our campus. BHU has one museum in their campus. Mysore University has one museum in their campus. So different universities also do have. Universities and institutions do have museums in their campuses. And there are museums on different themes, subjects, and artifacts. I mean, under the sun, I was, for the last week, I was reading about museums and was trying to figure out the kind of subjects that museums do project. I mean, this is mind-boggling. In India, like from watches to toilets, from museum highlighting the Sikh history to the history of Sepoy mutiny, from science to liberal arts, we have museums of all shapes, varieties, subjects, and objects. We have a museum of motorbike, camera, radio, doll, utensils, even brooms. In Jodhpur, we have a museum dedicated to brooms. I had been there. The place is called M.Chhaterjee, and it was established by Kothari, Padma Bhushan Sri Kothariji. who wrote extensively about the culture of Rajasthan. He and their his son, they established this museum over a 10-acre piece of land, and there are over 150 different varieties of brooms, mind-boggling. And the way brooms have a connection with the kind of grain that is grown in different places, brooms that are used for different purposes, right? Mind-boggling. Similarly, there is a museum of toilets. In fact, Time magazine considers it one of the 10 most varied kind of museums. So there are toilets and toilets and toilets, right? And interestingly, this was established by the founder of Sulabh Socha, Bindeswar Tiwari. Bindeswar Pathak, I'm sorry, Bindeswar Pathak, in 1992, right? Now, there are museums which encourage and emphasize on serious academic research. There are several museums, like, so for example, the museum in Kolkata, the museum that we have in Mumbai. That's also a very old museum. Right? Again, in the British era museum. Right? They encourage serious academic research. The museum, on the Media Museum, National Media Museum that we have in Bhopal, right? It also encourages the serious academic research. And there are museums which emphasize exhibit and activities around the exhibit and or theme of the exhibits, like we do in Dhenkanal Science Center. Right? Activities planned within the thematic scheme of that center. So there could be different kinds of museums with different objectives, but despite all variety, despite such wide variety, museums are bound by a common goal, and that goal is the preservation and interpretation of some material aspect of society's cultural consciousness. That is the overarching common goal. And that's why museums are important. They show us the link between past and present. And they don't stop at that. They also hint at and often show the roadmap for the future. Like there is a museum on partition, right? It shows the history, the bloodied history, right? Never before in the recent history, the world has seen such violence, such displacement of human beings. Now that museum also reminds us about the futility of such exercises, about the violence that can human beings perpetrate to others. And thereby, it gives us a lesson, thereby it gives us a roadmap. Right? So does science museums. So does other museums. Right? It also gives us a roadmap for the future if we look into it. A journalist, Rebecca Carlson, says in her blog that in today's uncertain times, that's what she says, in today's uncertain times, museums can act as an anchor in the storm, right? And this resonates when you look at Russia and Ukraine war. This resonates when you look at Middle East. You look at Iran, you look at Iraq, you look at Turkey, right? This resonates when you go and look at Latin America, right? The Maya civilization, what great civilization, and what is the present, right? So museums kind of act as an anchor in the storm, right? Maybe we will look back and find out our roots. Maybe we'll rediscover our culture. Maybe we will know our history better, and that will show us a roadmap for the future. Now, journalist Rebecca Clarison gives five reasons why we need museums now more than ever. She says it helps us to learn from the past, it brings communities together, it helps us to stand firm in face of adversity. When you look at war museums, right? When you look at a museum of Everest, recently I had been to Darjeeling and there is a museum over there on Everest, India's fora of Everest scaling, right? There's a museum. And then you watch this museum, look at those photographs and models and this and that, and then take pride in this fact that people actually went there, scaled Everest at a time when you couldn't carry oxygen up there. Now it has been very easy, but back then. Now she says that thanks to digital technology, museums are being transformed from spaces of looking and learning to spaces of interaction, participation, and engagement. That is another shift in the objective of museum, about which I'll come back in a short while from now. This is one important aspect about how museums are transforming itself into a more interactive space which kind of provides impetus to more innovation. We'll come back to this. And it's educating future generations. And to this list, may I add three of my points. One is it provides opportunity to explore other points of view, other cultures and history. Right? And this is particularly important for India, which is a multicultural land. Right? It's a multicultural land of continental proportion. We do not know very much about the culture, the history of people living in other part of our own country. And in this museum, it shows us how do we differ and where do we meet together. Right. The second point that I want to highlight about the importance of museums, that it provides space for experimental learning aimed at increasing emotional involvement with the subjects presented. And maybe it encourages us to think in rational terms, especially the science museums that we have in our country. Right? Science centers like our next door neighbor, Dhenkanal Science Center. Right? We suffer from irrationality, Indians more so. So in order to bring back that rationality, this kind of experimental learning helps. When you can actually go and do things. Right? I remember M.Chhaterjee was there in the science center, and in order to highlight this fact that most of the snakes are non-poisonous, he used to carry a snake in his pocket and he used to put it out and put on the palms of people to highlight this fact that not all snakes are poisonous, right? Maybe this kind of learning, experimental learning, you do some experiments and learn how do the ojas, the gunyas, they kind of bamboozle you, they swindle you. Experimental learning. There is another part of this experimental learning, right? There is one museum about which I was reading, I didn't know. Food you intake and how much time does it last in your stomach, right? There is an experiment there and it demonstrates that, right? There is another museum which shows you how many persons right now are sleeping hungry, right? So with models and charts and this and that, they show you that in real time. So this experimental learning makes you understand the situation. Right? Now, the third point that I want to highlight, that it fosters the experience of awe and wonder. These two human feelings, awe and wonder, right? It takes us to learn more, to engage with knowledge in a more pronounced way, in a more deeper way. In fact, these are the trigger point of further learning, awe and wonder. When the first Homo sapien probably would have looked at forest fire, you would have felt this feeling of awe. Oh my God, what's happening? And probably the next moment, you would have felt this wonder, why this is happening like this. And that probably would have triggered the curiosity, which might egg him, drive him to do more experiment and to find out the real cause of forest fire. And the next logical step, how do they use forest fire for their own benefit? So for advancement of civilization, these two feelings, awe and wonder, are necessary. And sun museums, they help foster this experience. And therefore, museums are important. Now, it's true that in not too distant past, museums have been used as agents of hard power. Say, I'm talking about 19th century, right, 18th, 19th century. As I was reading this article by Gail Lord, who is the president and co-founder of an organization called Lord Cultural Resources. He writes that museums were repositories of hard power. It used to safeguard the spoils of war and human conquest of nature. They reflected the state's hegemony, which was very useful for cultural diplomacy. Now, cultural diplomacy boasts, whereas soft power persuades. And with time, museums have become centers of soft power. Now, when we have come to discuss power, let's discuss emerging power of museums. Right? Museums, over a period of time, as varieties of museums increased, as more and more disciplines came within the fold of museums and all, they have started acquiring new identity and assuming new roles. As a repository of artifacts and as an interface for free flow of knowledge exchange, it has assumed the power to transform people. International Council of Museums, as Mr. Raut was just telling you, has flagged three powers. The power of achieving sustainability, right? This is one thing that we badly need so that our planet survives. And museums, they have this power to disseminate scientific and environmental information about the state of the environment, which causes disruptions and which shows us how this sustainability could be brought about, how we can contain the environmental degradation and how we can ensure sustainability. That's the power of achieving sustainability. The second power that ICON has flagged is the power of innovating on digitalization and accessibility. This has two elements. One is access. Now, the 2 years of COVID also kind of did play a role in bringing about this at a faster rate. Although the world was moving towards this, it's like the online presence of museums. Most of the big museums of the world, the well-known museums, they have online presence now, right? They have created, with the help of artificial intelligence, such website in which you get that experience of actually going in and looking at those exhibits, right? So access, the problem of access has largely been taken care of by digitization. And the second thing that museums are trying to do is to be innovative in providing that experience, in providing hands-on experience, thereby providing the opportunity to innovate, to experiment, right? That will bring us to another era: transformation of museums from places of repository where things were just put together so that you can go and have a look at it, to a place where you can actually engage with them, with those exhibits, and create something else, right? That is the transformation museums have undergone and are undergoing. Now, the third is the power of community building through education. All museums, I should say almost all museums, now are providing space for community building. They are actively encouraging people to come and indulge in different activity, to get connected with the museum so that they can build communities which could in turn help the museum to grow. This is a win-win situation for both the museums and people, right? So the power of community building through education. In several museums here and abroad, I've seen that groups have been created to call themselves friends of the museum, right? They come and engage with all the activities that museums conduct, and they also help the museums in running them. Now, there are changes in museums from other viewpoints as well. This is exactly what I was trying to hint. From agents of hard power, it has turned into centers of soft power. From functioning under state on an elite class control, which was the norm in 18th and 19th century, museums are gradually acquiring a democratic persona. In US and Canada, almost half of the museums these days are run by civil society organizations, not-for-profit organizations, not the government. Now, civil society is assuming more responsibility in establishing and managing museums, and therefore, we also find museums on different subjects, different artifacts, different areas, right? Like we have a museum of a Pankha fan, Jatin Das, the renowned artist. He tried to set up this museum of Pankha fan, right? From the fan that the Mahima Sannyasis used to the fan that Spanish ladies did use, and all kinds of fan, and each and every fan has a cultural story. It's connected with some culture, right? A kind of lifestyle. So putting them together, right? So that is what many individuals are doing, many groups are doing, many NGOs are also doing. So as a consequence of their place in civil society, museums have acquired new roles, new responsibilities and opportunities. So museums are now stimulating the knowledge economy. Museums are attracting talent to cities, generating cities and regions as tourism destination. Do you know that London has probably 2 dozen plus museums? So people go over there to visit museums. Right? In Paris, the Louvre Museum is the must-go place. Right? Recent 2 years back, before pandemic, I had been to Madrid, and there were several museums over there, especially of art. Right? We went to a small place called Toledo, about 80 miles from Madrid. There are museums over there, and people from far and wide, they come and visit those museums. So it attracts people, hosts tourism, and posits that small town, historical town, as a tourist place, right? As a place which values high art, right? So all this museums become more prominent as soft power platforms when they amplify civil discourse, accelerate cultural exchange, and contribute to cultural intelligence among the great diversity of the city dwellers, visitors, policymakers, and others. So, is the power of museum. Now, to end my deliberation, how do we harness this power? How do we help museums to grow and help us to grow? This kind of a win-win situation for both, right? So my suggestions will be to the listeners here and to all those who will be listening to my deliberation. I'll be publishing this as an article also, an essay also. First, do visit museums. More footfalls in museums will energize the ecosystem. That will attract more visitors, right? And more visitors will make the museum authorities more vigilant about the upkeep of their operation, right? The second, participate in activities organized by the museums or under the aegis of the museum. Like, say, for example, the museum in Bombay, they organize several cultural programs and other academic cultural programs, right? If you happen to be in Mumbai and if you happen to chance upon such programs, please do go and participate. Third, form friends of museum clubs and organize activities to foster collaborative learning. This I have been telling for quite some time now. We must form friends of museum, friends of centers of learning, right? So that they can also help these centers grow and manage themselves better. Fourth, patronize museums in any which way you can. If it's a non-government museum, then from raising fund for it to buying merchandise from the museum, from organizing events in sync with the character of the concerned museum, to mobilizing support for such events, anything, any which way you can help patronize museums, do it. Last but not the least, and this I have seen in several countries, volunteering. Volunteering. I have seen that in Rajasthan also. In several museums, there are persons who are retired and they are working as volunteers. Their work is to conduct the visitors. In most of the time, the visitors probably do not have time or inclination to look at the finer nuances of the exhibit. So there, these gentlemen with some training, they explain them the nuances, right? The finer points, the points that a visitor, casual visitor might miss, right? Kind of a guide, right? Somebody can volunteer to help the museum do that, right? They can also provide inputs to museums in terms of ideas, artifacts, exhibits. Like, so for example, in our media museum, we have got artifacts from people who are ready to donate. And with their donations, we have made our museum. I appeal to all who are listening to this deliberation to please help museum so that museum can enrich us and thereby the future generation also are enriched. Thank you so very much.
Thanks a lot, sir. Uh, it was very specific and theme based, no doubt. Before we end the session, may I request all our viewers, those who are participants, if you have any question, please unmute and ask questions. Anyone, if any query?
Okay, what I'll do, I'll
Yeah.
write my email ID on the chat box.
Acha, sir, sir.
And then if somebody has a question, because I understand forming a question and articulating needs some time. So here is my email ID.
Sir,
Should you have any question, maybe you can send me mail so that I can address them. This is my email.
yes. Even if you, uh, any query even from IIMC, they can find out.
Yeah.
Really, it is very true that vast variety of museums give us an insight of not only what could be, but also of what has been. And museums have the power to transform the world around us. Chatterjee has very nicely and elaborately explained. So, on behalf of family of Dhenkanal Science Center, National Council of Science Museums, Ministry of Culture, Government of India, I wholeheartedly thank you, sir, for sparing your valuable time, and even looking forward for similar support in future. Thanks a lot, sir. We'll end this session, and those who are having any query, they can write to Chatterjee, sir.
And I'll
Thank
send
you.
them to you quickly.
End the session.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank
very
you,
much.
sir.